In the previous episode, we discussed events surrounding Simpson's case and the key evidence gathered by the LAPD. If you haven't watched the previous episode yet, you may want to do that first. In this episode, we will continue with the most exciting part of this case, the courtroom trial. Simpson, being a superstar in America, undoubtedly drew the attention of the entire nation with the murder of his wife, showcasing his significant influence. Consequently, this trial was dubbed the trial of the century. After pre-trial preparations, the court confirmed the jury members consisting of 12 individuals, 10 women, and 2 men. Among the 12 jurors were 8 black individuals, 1 white individual, 1 Hispanic individual, and 2 mixed-race individuals. The presiding judge for this case was Lance Allen Ito, born in Los Angeles in 1950, making him 45 years old at the time. Judge Ito was renowned for his fair and rigorous judgments of criminal cases. As the presiding judge, his Japanese-American background prevented the public scrutiny into the racial matters of this case further. The lead prosecutor for this case was Marcia Clark, born in 1953, making her 42 years old. She was a seasoned female prosecutor known for her quick wit, extensive experience in criminal cases, and numerous successful prosecutions. In pursuit of support from the black community, the prosecutors specially enlisted the assistance of Christopher Darden, an experienced black attorney, to bolster their case. In the previous episode, we mentioned that Simpson consistently denied guilt, prompting him to spend a considerable sum to assemble a defense team comprising multiple lawyers and experts. The defense lineup was unprecedentedly luxurious and was dubbed the Dream Team by American media. It included prominent figures like Robert Shapiro, a well-connected Jewish attorney who had previously represented Hollywood star Marlon Brando and was highly skilled in strategy. Another member was Johnnie Cochran, a black attorney who had helped Michael Jackson in legal battles and held high esteem in the legal community. Francis Lee Bailey, a renowned criminal defense attorney, was also part of the team, recognized as one of the top players in American legal sphere. Michael Baden, a forensic expert who served as the chief medical examiner in the Kennedy assassination case, and Henry Lee, a renowned criminal investigator and crime scene evidence expert, were also on the team. Besides these individuals, there were other legal, forensic, and evidence experts, totaling more than 10 people in this dream team. Once the trial began, the prosecutors provided a series of evidences, highlighting key pieces and providing additional details. Chief Prosecutor Marcia Clark stated that on the day of the incident, June 12th, Simpson took a flight from LA to Chicago. Shortly after Simpson arrived at a Chicago hotel, he received a call from the detective Ron Phillips of the LAPD. Upon being informed of his ex-wife Nicole's murder the previous night, Simpson's initial reaction was surprisingly, "Who killed her?" The prosecution argued that this was not a normal response, as most people would inquire about the circumstances and the cause of death upon receiving such news. The victims of this case were Nicole, Simpson's ex-wife, and Ronald Goldman, a restaurant waiter. So, what was the relationship between these two individuals? Some people observed that they were very close and often appeared together, suggesting that they were likely more than just ordinary friends. On the night of the incident, Nicole and Goldman were together. Although Goldman was there to deliver the glasses, it seemed that he did not want to leave immediately after delivering them. Through a confirmation from one of Nicole's close friends, it was revealed that Nicole had told him that Simpson had threatened her, stating that if she was with another man, he would kill him. The police claimed that Simpson had a clear propensity for violence, as evidenced by the records of responding 9 times to resolve domestic violence issues between Simpson and Nicole. Therefore, the prosecution believed that with the testimony and evidences they had, it was very easy to establish the motive for the crime. In terms of timing, Simpson had ample opportunity to commit the crime. Let's go back to the night of the incident. Suppose Simpson was the perpetrator. The neighbors heard barking dogs at 10:15 p.m. According to the forensic examination, the victim's time of death was estimated to be between 10 and 10:15 p.m. Assuming Simpson committed the murder at 10:15 p.m., he could have immediately driven back home to clean up the blood. It's important to note that Simpson's house was very close, and there were few cars at night on the road. A normal drive will only take about 6 minutes from Simpson's house to Nicole's house. Therefore, Simpson had enough time to return home, clean his clothes, and leave the house by 11 p.m., taking a driver to Los Angeles International Airport. According to Simpson's own account, he was sleeping alone at home between 9:40 p.m. and 10:50 p.m., and there was no one to corroborate his alibi. Therefore, if Simpson were the culprit, he had the motive, the opportunity, and all that remained was the supportive evidence. The prosecutors held several key pieces of evidence that were highly detrimental to Simpson. For instance, a black glove was found at the crime scene, bearing traces of blood of the 2 victims and Simpson's. Moreover, police found another blood-stained black glove in Simpson's home, and upon examination, it was confirmed to be a match to the one found at the crime scene. The bloody shoe print found at the crime scene matched Simpson's shoe size. There were traces of Simpson's blood and hair at the crime scene. The prosecutors emphasized that on the second day after the incident, when Simpson was brought in for questioning, a cut was found on his finger, unlikely sustained during the crime. In court, the prosecutors meticulously analyzed and listed the timing, motive, and evidence for the crime. All of this seemed to form a complete chain, making it difficult for Simpson to dispel any suspicion. From early stages of the trial, public opinion tended to view the prosecution's evidence as reasonable and sufficient, indicating Simpson's guilt. However, it was now time for Simpson's dream team to showcase their prowess. The dream team's approach in the court was truly spectacular and untraditional. They didn't rush to respond to the evidence presented by the prosecution. Instead, they requested to question Detective Mark Fuhrman, who was responsible for this case. It's worth noting that Fuhrman was the hero of this case, as he discovered crucial evidence such as gloves and bloodstains at the crime scene and Simpson's home. At this point, the defense attorney began to question Fuhrman. "Have you ever used the N-word?" Fuhrman seemed somewhat puzzled by this question, appearing surprised. He replied, "No." The defense attorney continued, "Have you used this word in the past 10 years? Fuhrman replied, "To the best of my recollection, no." Then came the bombshell. In 1985 or 1986, did you refer to an African American as the N-word? Would you forget that? Fuhrman answered firmly, "No, that's not possible." The attorney then challenged him. "Can you swear that you've never called any black person the N-word in the past 10 years? Fuhrman, feeling somewhat irritated by the defense attorney's relentless questioning in front of the national television audience, raising his voice and emphatically declared, "I have never said that." Upon hearing Fuhrman's response, the defense attorney smirked and proceeded to present evidence to the court, a recording of an interview with Fuhrman from 1986. The recording captured the entire interview process, during which Fuhrman used the derogative N-word a total of 41 times. The revelation caused an uproar in the courtroom and shocked many audiences across the United States, as the footage revealed the white detective's blatant racial prejudice. Fuhrman, seated as a witness, was dumbfounded and speechless, having boxed himself in with his previous adamant denials. He now faced the public outrage and found himself in an untenable position. Seizing the opportunity, the defense attorney relentlessly continued to question Fuhrman. "Did you fabricate the evidence and investigation reports at the scene? Did you intentionally frame Simpson out of racial bias?" Overwhelmed by relentless interrogation, Fuhrman became flustered and at a loss for words. Having suffered a major setback, he made matters worse with each response, eventually opting to exercise his right to remain silent. Unexpectedly, at this point in the case, the entire public opinion in America has shifted. The Simpson case was no longer just a simple murder case. Over the past few months, the media's frenzied coverage and continuous sensationalism had elevated the case to a level of racial discrimination. The Simpson case had become a struggle between black and white. According to a survey report, 74% of white people believed Simpson was guilty, while 77% of black people believed that he was innocent. Therefore, the pressure of racial prejudice also became one of the important reasons for the turning point in this case. In fact, playing the race card to influence public opinion was a strategy that the Dream Team had prepared well in advance. Next, the defense lawyers began discussing one of the key pieces of evidence in the case, the glove. A store clerk could testify that his son Nicole purchased the black gloves. The defense attorney argued, if Simpson really wore these gloves to commit the crimes, he not only failed to destroy such crucial evidence but also easily allowed police to find them, even at both the crime scene and his own house. This situation clearly doesn't make any sense. It seemed more like someone intentionally framing him. Indeed, the defense attorney's provocative speech and assumptions angered the prosecutors, who unexpectedly requested Simpsons to try on the gloves. The defense attorney, as if forewarned, remained calm and let Simpson try on the gloves. From the courtroom footage, it was apparent that the gloves appeared too small, much smaller than Simpson's hand. Simpson struggled to force both gloves onto his hands, then raised his hands to show the court, resulting in one of the most famous moments of the case. In the footage, Simpson appeared very innocent, as if saying, "These simply don't fit." Originally, it was unnecessary to have Simpson try on the gloves. If he didn't want to, people would actually suspect him, but he couldn't put them on. That's a different story. Incredibly, it was the prosecution that made a request for Simpson to try on the gloves, when they didn't have to and didn't know whether the gloves actually fit. This significant mistake by the prosecution was also documented in the textbook of courtroom lawyer errors. Never ask a question if you're uncertain of the answer. It later became known that this is actually the strategy the Dream Team devised. To implement it, they had Simpson stop taking his arthritis medication 2 weeks before, resulting in his hands swelling significantly and his fingers becoming immobile. Through this round of confrontation between the prosecution and defense, Simpson slowly turned the tables from a highly unfavorable position to a more balanced one. Next, the defense sent in Dr. Henry Lee, a 57-year-old forensic expert, who launched an attack from some critical angles of evidence. The police found a drop of blood on the gate railing at the crime scene, which, after DNA testing, was determined to belong to the defendant, Simpson. However, the defense immediately raised question about this drop of blood. First, EDTA was detected in his blood. EDTA is added to prevent blood clotting during blood collection. Normal blood do not contain EDTA. So why was there EDTA found in Simpson's blood obtained at the crime scene? Secondly, the police blood collection process did not follow the standard procedure. At the time, the forensic technicians sent to collect Simpson's blood samples did not immediately send the samples to the laboratory for testing after collection. Instead, for some reason, they kept the blood samples in their pockets for a whole day before sending them for analysis. During that day, many things could have happened. Although the technicians collected 8 milliliters of Simpson's blood, only 6.5 mil were ultimately delivered to the lab. So where did the missing 1.5 mil of blood go? Thirdly, the drop of blood on Nicole's front gate railing was not collected immediately after the incident, but 3 weeks later. The blood samples was collected on July 3rd, and in the video footage of the initial crime scene investigation on June 13th, there was no trace of blood at the same location. How can this be explained? Thus, what was originally a key evidence for the prosecutors now seemed less credible. The defense then listed a series of errors made by the police. On the night the bodies of the 2 victims were discovered, the police arrived at the scene quickly. However, for some reason, the coroner didn't arrive promptly and did not reach the scene until 10 hours after the incident, missing the optimal time to accurately determine the time of death of the victims. But that's not the worst part. When the LAPD arrived at the crime scene and realized the coroner wouldn't arrive promptly, a police officer, thinking that he needed to preserve the scene, casually picked up a white blanket from Nicole's room and covered the bodies with it. It's important to know that despite Nicole and Simpson's divorce, they were still involved periodically, so finding Simpson's DNA on the blanket was not unusual. By covering the bodies with the blanket, it became highly likely that any DNA left on the bodies by Simpson came from the blanket. Well, due to the unprofessional behavior of the police, Simpson's DNA presence at the scene, which was a powerful evidence, now become less credible. We know that after the incident, Furman, along with 3 other officers, went to Simpson's house and entered it by climbing over the wall. Therefore, the evidence obtained at Simpson's house that night was illegally obtained and amounted to what is known as the fruit of the poisonous tree. It turns out that although Furman went with other officers at night, he was the only one who climbed over the wall into Simpson's house. In other words, he was the first and only to discover the bloodstained gloves and socks in the room, and only he could testify to it. Furman arrived at the crime scene first and then went to Simpson's house, so it's very likely that he inadvertently brought traces of blood and hair from the crime scene into Simpson's house. Therefore, the defense argued that the evidence police obtained at Simpson's house should be deemed invalid. On October 3rd, 1995 at 10 a.m., the case went to its final trial. After 267 days of trial, with 133 witnesses called to testify and a transcript of 45,000 pages, the 12-member jury deliberated for only 4 hours before reaching a final verdict. Simpson was not guilty of the murder charge. Upon the announcement of the verdict, some were disappointed while others cheered. The African American community cheered because the U.S. justice system had worked for an African American. However, the key point of the case may not have been about black and white. Rather, it provided good demonstration of procedural justice and the U.S. justice system, which seems to be more effective for wealthy individuals. At the time, the American legal community widely recognized the doubts raised by Dr. Lee on several pieces of physical evidence were key to Simpson's acquittal. Dr. Lee said, "Whether testifying for the prosecution or the defense, I only speak for the evidence." This case also made Dr. Lee famous. According to American law, criminal and civil courts are separate. Although Simpson was not held criminally responsible, he still had to answer in civil court and was ordered to pay $12.5 million in compensation to the families of the 2 victims. In September 2007, Simpson was arrested in Las Vegas, Nevada, on charges of armed robbery and kidnapping, among others. In 2008, he was sentenced to 33 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for 9 years. On October 1st, 2017, after 9 years in prison, Simpson was granted parole and released. Many years after the case, the public seemed to have cooled from the emotional and racial aspects of the case. Therefore, CNN conducted another survey, which showed that 83% of Americans now believe Simpson is guilty, and 53% of African Americans also believe so. The Simpson case showcased the American justice system, while also keeping the mystery alive. Whether Simpson is the murderer has been debated for decades, and no one can convince the other side. On April 10, 2024, O.J. Simpson died of cancer at the age of 76, burying the truth with him.